especialmente sobre que bases o Sul Global deve se reindustrializar, como enfrentarmos a catástrofe climática e como esse processo de desenvolvimento deve levar em conta as mudanças climáticas, e a necessidade da gestão dos nossos recursos e da soberania do Sul Global sobre esses recursos, e a necessidade de uma nova arquitetura financeira global. Então, durante esse evento, nós teremos participantes de diversas escolas de pensamentos, dirigentes e ativistas de diversas organizações e países, mas, em comum, nós compartilhamos a ideia de que a economia diz respeito às pessoas, diz respeito aos seres humanos, não aos mercados, não aos bancos, não às corporações, não exclusivamente aos governos. Que a economia se destina à vida das pessoas e, no nosso caso, todos e todas que participamos, que a economia deve melhorar a vida das pessoas e não condená-las para garantir os lucros de bancos, corporações ou de determinados governos do Atlântico Norte. E, além disso, entendemos também, nos une, de que a economia é capaz de oferecer respostas mais corajosas, respostas mais estruturantes do que uma certa miséria intelectual com a qual nós temos convivido nesse tema, de que soluções paliativas, restritivas, etc., seriam suficientes. Ao contrário, como eu disse, o que define os eventos do Dilemas da Humanidade é a nossa convicção de que vivemos uma crise estrutural do capitalismo, estrutural porque o capitalismo não é capaz de solucionar os problemas que ele mesmo gerou. Então, esse será o espírito que guiará os nossos trabalhos por esses próximos dias. Então, novamente, tenhamos uma boa conferência, sejamos todos e todas bem-vindos, bem-vindas, e para coordenar os nossos trabalhos dessa noite, gostaria de convidar a nossa também anfitriã, professora Rosa, por favor. Eu vou deixar, se a senhora quiser. A senhora aqui. Obrigado.
Boa noite a todos. Está desligado?
Desliguei, perdão, professor.
Achei. Boa noite a todos e a todas. Me incumbiram para mediar essa sessão de abertura da atividade, né? Que vocês viram quão importante ela é, não só pelas palavras do Miguel, mas pela força das três organizações que estão por trás, né? Boa noite, Cláudio, boa noite, Leda, meus colegas, estou vendo, desculpe a minha informalidade, mas eu vejo amigos de longa data, tenho que cumprimentar. Mas a Assembleia Internacional dos Povos, a Tricontinental e o meu querido MST. O MST acho que é algo que está no coração de todos, né? Que resistem a todos os momentos e a todos os governos. Bom, me cabe somente mediar essa atividade. Vocês viram que a atividade é pesada, vai até quinta-feira, que o objetivo é o aprofundamento das discussões dos temas aqui levantados pelo Miguel. Mas hoje tem um caráter um pouco diferente, não só de abertura, mas também para permitir que outros que não vão participar das discussões de amanhã até quinta-feira possam ouvir algumas pessoas que são referências para nós, né? Então, eu vou chamar à mesa o Fernando Haddad. Se encontra ou não chegou ainda? Está chegando. E se não chegar, nós sabemos por quê, né? Afinal, teve um maluco que mudou todas os aranceles, né? E simplesmente o mundo está tumultuado. Então, a gente compreenderá. Mas ele vai chegar. Também convidar a Cláudia de la Cruz. Depois eu falo brevemente sobre a Cláudia. onde você quiser, tá? E agora, provavelmente, vou errar o nome, claro, né? Prashad, tá, pode ser assim? A Cláudia, dos Estados Unidos, Prashad, da Índia, e o Fernando Haddad ainda não chegou. E também eu queria chamar o nosso pró-reitor de Educação Continuada, Paulo Sérgio Feuz, que vai fazer uma fala em nome da PUC. E aí eu retomo. Olá, tudo bem?
Boa noite a todos e todas. É um prazer estar aqui hoje representando a Pontifícia Universidade Católica de São Paulo nesse tão importante evento. A PUC de São Paulo fica honrada em receber em abertura desse evento do Instituto Tricontinental de Pesquisa Social, do Movimento Sem Terra e da Assembleia Internacional dos Povos. Essa casa da democracia não pode faltar nesse momento, até porque os debates sobre os efeitos, efetivamente, da economia global se acentuaram e estão se acentuando cada dia mais em face aí a atitudes ilúcidas e talvez até incompreensíveis de alguns gestores mundiais. Então, em nome da reitoria dessa universidade, em nosso nome próprio, essa casa está sempre aberta a todos os movimentos que lutam pela democracia, não só no país, como também no mundo. Muito obrigado, desejo a todos um bom evento. Eu peço vênia, que eu vou ter que ir para uma sala de aula, mas desejo a todos aí um excelente evento. Muito obrigado.
Ligou? Bom, antes de eu apresentar os nossos palestrantes, eu sou Rosa Maria Marques, estou como coordenadora do mestrado em Economia Política da PUC São Paulo. Está dando eco, não está? O lado de cá diz que sim. Ele tem uma escolha, né? Esquerda ou direita? Vamos lá. Mas estava eu dizendo que eu estou como coordenadora do mestrado de Economia Política e eu faço questão de dizer que nós, do mestrado de Economia Política, realmente abraçamos essa iniciativa e agradecemos que vocês tenham procurado a PUC, porque isso traz um alimento de discussão para a nossa própria PUC. Como disse o nosso pró-reitor, nós somos uma referência, de fato, na luta pela democracia do período da ditadura militar. Mas isso faz muito tempo, então a gente precisa se retroalimentar todo o tempo, né? Então, muito obrigada por essa oportunidade de nós estar sediando a abertura desse importante encontro. A Cláudia de la Cruz, ativista, foi candidata à presidência da República nos Estados Unidos, em 24, pelo Partido Socialista, e é professora adjunta na City University of New York. Está dando eco, moço. É diretora executiva da International Foundation for Community Organizing e cofundadora de People's Forum. Ok? Hablas espanhol? Sim. Sim, muito bem. E o Prashad é historiador, jornalista e intelectual orgânico. É autor de 40 livros. Então, o moço já escreveu 40 livros, traduzidos em diversos países. Um dia eu quero chegar e escrever uns 5 livrinhos, já estaria bom. É diretor executivo do Instituto Tricontinental de Pesquisa Social e contribui com veículos de mídia pelo mundo inteiro, né? A organização da nossa atividade, a princípio, seriam 30 minutos para cada, ok? Talvez, se o Fernando não chegar, a gente pode aumentar um pouquinho a fala de vocês ele chegando, a gente dá uma restringida, né? Quem quer começar? É a Cláudia? Ou...
No, Claudia. Claudia.
I can start. You want to start?
Better.
Oh, para isso.
I was asked to speak in English, so I'll speak in English. Although for me, Spanish is the language of the heart. I want to share greetings from the working class people of the United States, those who have been on the street for the last 18 months in solidarity with the Palestinian people. I want to share greetings from the working class that has been taking the streets all across the United States against the capitalist billionaire agenda of the Trump administration, but who understands that it's not only Trump that is the problem, but the capitalist system as a whole. I want to share greetings from the students, the immigrants, the Black, brown, indigenous community that understands that if we don't struggle, we don't win. That is a community that understands that the only way that we fight U.S. empire and capitalism and win is through building international solidarity. I want to thank those who have convened us in this space, mostly because it is a very critical moment in history. We are living unprecedented times of challenges and opportunities. And I want to focus the time that I have, which I did not calculate 30 minutes, but just give me the mic and I'll speak. I will share, some of the opportunities that we see within the belly of the beast, what others call the U.S. empire. In this moment, why share that? Because this space of Dilemas of Humanities has been a space that has historically allowed us to exchange, to be in conversation with each other, not for the sake of just being in conversation, but for the sake of creating collaborations, for the sake of creating plans as a unified working class that we should be, a space that allows us to go back re-energized to do the work that we must do in our nation states. And so I'll share some of what's happening in the United States so that it also becomes a glimpse of hope in the midst of chaos. Because there is hope in the midst of chaos, I promise you. I want to share that in the United States, in the last 18 months, people have been chanting all across the country, Gaza will free us all. Gaza will free us all. And that has really sipped into the consciousness of a lot of young people who have dared to fight against a narrative that has told generations that the Palestinian people and the people in the Middle East are the ones that we should be afraid of. The people in the United States have come to the conclusion that the enemies of those of us in the United States are in the Pentagon, are in the White House, and are in Congress. That the same people that attack working class people every day are the same ones that are financing the bombing and the killing of babies in Palestine. These young people stood firmly in taking over their universities. These young people stood firmly in facing police repression, and they continue to do so. It is the United States, the people, that have taken over the streets in the past weekend to demand an end on the attacks on the immigrant community. People who understand that it is U.S. imperialism and it is capitalism that accelerates a crisis all across the globe that forces people to migrate through war, through militarism, and through the extraction of resources. People have come to the conclusion that the economic and political system in which we live and operate is the biggest robbery, not only of the material necessities of our people, but also the biggest robbery of our dreams and aspirations as the working class. The people of the United States have come to the conclusion that Trump, you could all say boo, boo, that Trump is not the disease, that Trump is a symptom, that Trump is a result of an economic and political system that is inherently undemocratic, that is inherently brutal, that is inherently vicious, and that seeks to destroy humanity and the planet. People have come to the conclusion that the overt taking over billionaires, I mean, in the United States, the people that are controlling the Department of Energy are the same people that are investing in oil companies, that are extracting resources. That's a huge contradiction. The person that is at the head of the Department of Education, which they want to abolish, is someone that actually benefits from the lack of education that our poor and working class communities could possibly have. These billionaires are looting federal funds. They seek to privatize Social Security. They seek to privatize more education and healthcare. And these are attacks that working class people are feeling, and so they're understanding the boomerang effects of imperialism. They're feeling the levels of crushing agony that for many decades, people in the global South have felt. And what we are doing as people in the United States is looking at the global South as people who want to learn how to resist, to learn how to organize, to work with and collaborate. And so why is it important for me to share this? Because these are the struggles that are never placed on the mainstream. These are the conflicts in the United States, the contradictions that exist in the United States that many people don't get to hear about or experience. And there is an echo chamber of a very small group of people that is not the majority, that gives the sense internationally that somehow the United States generally has become more backwards, more fascist, more white supremacist. And I'm here to tell you that that is a very small group of people. That the majority of people in the United States are not in favor of the Trump administration. In fact, 58% of Americans believe that capitalism in general does no good to them as a people. 64% of young people under the age of 34 stand against the genocide in Palestine. And you would not know that if you were to turn any mainstream news. And so I'm here to say and share that there's an entire world of people within the United States that understand that our livelihood and survival are tied to the international working class, and is committed to advancing conversations and advancing plans of building a better society. I think it's also important to share, and it was mentioned, I ran a campaign with the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which was a campaign, the only one in 2024 that was explicitly socialist, with a socialist agenda. And it was very successful. It was the campaign that gained more success as a socialist campaign in 86 years. And that's huge. I share that because people want to make us believe that somehow when we talk about socialism, we're talking about a French idea, something that is, reserved for the margins. And the reality is that people want something that is an alternative, that is a real opposition to the economic and political system that continues to make their lives miserable. For a long time, I was born in the Bronx, the South Bronx to be specific. It's like a favela here in Brazil. It's a working class, poor community. And I was often told that poor people didn't have to care about anything else than electing politicians that will do politics for us. They said, you don't have to worry about learning about the economy, because guess what? Those who have political and economic power are the ones to make economic decisions for you. And during the campaign, I learned that the narrative that we've been always told, that poor and working class people are apathetic, is completely wrong. Poor and working class people are not apathetic to politics. They talk politics every day. Every day. The politics that our people, working class people, and I will dare say globally, are interested in are the type of politics that allow them a space to make decisions. That's called popular democracy. That allows them to be at the front and center of the discussion and decision-making process. The type of economy that our people are interested in and are wanting to be engaged in is an economy that's democratized. An economy that allows our working class people to decide whether they are going to invest $1 trillion on a military industrial complex, or they are going to invest $1 trillion in education, in housing, in food, in creating more infrastructure. So our people are not apathetic to politics and the economies. They are apathetic to bourgeois politics and economy. They're apathetic to a capitalist system that tells them that they don't need to think and they don't need to be active. And that is something that was reaffirmed during that campaign when we met with many different people across the United States in over 64 cities. And these cities were not these swing states, which in US politics, swing states are the important ones. We met with people in Idaho, in Iowa, in places that neither Democrats or Republicans would go to. But you know who went there? The socialists went there. And engaged in conversations with people politically about the ways in which we are conditioned to think about ourselves and devalue the possibility of us contributing to creating a plan for humanity and the planet. Because ultimately that is what a socialist system should do. It was very interesting also, you know, we're told we don't need to care about international politics either. You know, NATO is mentioned. Nobody knows what NATO is, you know. But Trump and Kamala Harris and Biden get on stages and talk about how we need to fortify NATO. And people are like, what is NATO? But when people are able to connect their own experience to the experience of the international working class, that shifts. When we're able to let people know that, one, there is an economic cost, but there's also a human cost that happens not only across the seas, but also in our own communities, people get it. I went to a community in South Carolina with the highest rates of amputees due to diabetes. Preventable. In this community, the amount of people that were walking around without limbs was amazing. It was really crazy to see, like see it vividly. We're talking about 3 and 4 people. A lot of people. And I remember walking to an elderly man and saying to him, do you know that Cuba has life-saving medication that could have prevented you losing your toes and losing your limbs? And he said, no, but I would love to go to Cuba. It is not the people of the United States that are upholding that blockade. In fact, if the people knew, they would fight against it. It is not the people of the United States that are upholding the sanctions on Venezuela. It is not the people of the United States that went all in with the lawfare that happened here in Brazil, that positioned Bolsonaro to do all the crazy that he did. And what does that tell us? It tells us that we need to be able to create spaces for mass education. It tells us that we need to organize and we need to mobilize and we need to bring the diagnosis into the masses. That the diagnosis cannot stay in these conferences. That the diagnosis cannot stay in the classrooms. That the diagnosis needs to go to the day-to-day people that have the capacity to build the force of history that is necessary to transform everything that needs to be transformed. And that is what I learned being in the streets with the people during that campaign trail, and many more things. And I wanted to share those because it's very easy to become demoralized. It's very easy to become demobilized. It's very easy to become isolated in the work that we do. And I think the spaces that we create, such as this, is precisely, like I mentioned in the beginning, to become re-energized to do the work that is needed to do where it's needed to be done. And economy, the global economy, U.S. empire, internationalism, are terms that need to become ordinary terms for our people. Are terms that our people need to be able to utilize as a shield and as a weapon. But it takes everyone who has consciousness to engage in doing the work that is necessary to be done. If you're an educator, you teach. If you're a worker, you organize your workspace. If you live in a community, which I hope everybody here lives in some sort of community, you organize in that community. And I might be speaking to the choir, but I think it's always good to speak to the choir a couple of times, because even choirs need practice. Even choirs need repetition. And so I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to be in exchange and in conversation. I'm very honored to be sharing this space with my brother Vijay y con la compañera. Because again, we're here not to just love the moment. We're here to make history. And I think that in order for us to make history, it takes international solidarity. It takes a plan and a vision that speaks to the necessities of our people. There's been a lot of advancements in this capitalist world that we live in, and we're not utopian. We want a world with advances. We want a world with technology. We want a world that produces everything we need, but it cannot be hoarded by a small group of people, and it cannot be decided by that small group of people what needs to happen with it. So I hope that our conversations in these next couple of days produce a lot of creativity and gives a lot of the strength necessary, again, to go back and do the necessary work, which is hard work of resisting, but also building the world that we say we want. That takes a lot of courage, and we could only find courage in collective space. So thank you so much.
Obrigada, Cláudia. Tá ligado? Tá. Obrigada, Cláudia. Antes de eu passar a palavra para você, queria registrar a presença do Eduardo Suplicy, sempre nossa referência, né? E agora sim, passando a palavra.
Okay.
Vontade.
Let me see if I get this right. Eu queria poder falar em português. Pero no. Pero no. Disculpa. It's great to be here. It's great to be with Claudia. It's great to be in this room with so many familiar faces. I could spend the whole of my 30 minutes reciting the names of people I haven't seen for such a very long time, and I'm so happy to see once more. So welcome to this, really. Welcome to my life again, so many of you. We can now exchange new WhatsApp and WeChat numbers and get to know each other once again in this new moment. This new moment is defined by this genocide in Palestine. It reveals for us this international division of humanity, which is what it is. Some people have lives that are treated as precious, and other people's lives are disposable. You can kill 1 million people in Iraq and nobody remembers them. You kill one person in Europe and they are outraged. We don't really know what the mathematical formula is. One white life against how many brown and black lives? What is the formula? One Israeli is killed, they have to kill 10,000 Palestinians. Is that the formula? This is an international division of humanity. We've come here to discuss, in a sense, the section of human life called the economy. But the way we understand the economy is through the international division of humanity. And it pains me to be here at this moment when the world is defined by this genocidal behavior, unending. Benjamin Netanyahu goes to the United States, he gets a red carpet. Clever people say the red represents the blood of the Palestinians. Some people say the carpet should be so long that Netanyahu walks to infinity. Let him keep walking. Let him walk off the edge of the earth. But of course, it's not just Netanyahu, it's people who've designed this system. I'm so happy that Tricontinental, the International People's Assembly, the MST has convened this gathering. I'm so happy that we're going to be spending these days discussing detailed questions about trying to imagine a different economy, a different society. This is the year 2025. In 5 years, the member states of the United Nations had said that we would meet the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. 5 years we should be meeting those goals. But by the United Nations' own calculations, we are not only not going to meet the goals of eradicating poverty and ending hunger, but the worst elements of human misery are expanding. That's what United Nations figures show us. All of this is increasing. Hunger, poverty, houselessness, all the 17 goals are not going to be met. Firstly, we were all critical of the Millennium Development Goals. We were critical of the way they formulated the Sustainable Development Goals. It was bringing NGOization into the world of development. But even their goals, they are not going to meet. This is not our agenda. We want to produce socialism. We don't want the Sustainable Development Goals alone. This was their agenda. I'm just saying you're not meeting your own agenda, my friends. You masters of capitalism, you're not meeting your own agenda. A recent World Bank report called Pathways Out of the Polycrisis says that 3.5 billion people, this is a World Bank report, 3.5 billion people, or 44% of the global population, remains poor. 44% of the global population. This is a World Bank report. This isn't produced by, the magazines and newspapers I write for. That's a separate issue. We bang on about increasing poverty. Here's a World Bank. Okay, I don't like the term polycrisis. Let's not debate that now. Let's just take their own view at face value. And by the way, interestingly, in this report, the World Bank has decided to use the higher figure for defining poverty. They are going to the $6.85 per day, 6.85, which is a much better standard than the conventional $2.15 a day. But speaking to Brazilians now, $6.85 a day would buy you at today's prices a small loaf of bread at a padaria, at a small bakery. $6.85. How you expected to live even on that? That's a very small amount for most parts of the world. But at $6.85 a day, 44% of the world's population is earning that and below. It would take, the World Bank says, more than a century at current conditions to lift people above the $6.85 a day poverty line. It would take a century at current conditions. This is a grotesque failure of the Sustainable Development Goal approach, which is merely, that approach is merely the quantification of their entire development agenda. Their agenda, in other words, has failed. This was their agenda. They said that by 2030, we would meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Their agenda has failed. And by the way, they can't blame COVID, because the failure was there before COVID. In 2019, the figures already showed a deep decline in the number of people out of hunger, an increase in poverty. The only country that changes the statistics is China, which in this period abolished absolute poverty. Every other country has seen poverty rates increase. In November this year, in Doha, Qatar, many of the world leaders will gather for the Second World Summit for Social Development. By the way, how many of you have heard that the Second World Summit for Social Development will take place this year in November in Doha, Qatar? How many of you? Please show me your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. What is this? What kind of world is this? Our leaders are going to go to Doha this year to discuss social development, and not one media has informed you about this. Not one government has socialized the process of creating an agenda. Mexico even has not done this, and Mexico is one of the best governments. Professor Morales will come to us to talk about Mexico, I hope. Claudia Sheinbaum standing up to Donald Trump. We are so proud of her. But even Mexico hasn't socialized that this is on the agenda. The first World Summit for Social Development was held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. Okay, in 1992. Second to be held in 2025. What's happened to social development? Such a big gap. Nobody seems to care. It was called, unfortunately, the Earth Summit. It wasn't really the Earth Summit. It was meant to be a much broader debate, because the focus of attention was on the environmental crisis. But the aim of that summit had been to attend to the greater social crisis that afflicted the world. At that conference, with the Soviet Union just having collapsed, the agenda was narrowed. And nobody, apart from our dear Fidel Castro, seemed able to talk about the larger issues. Castro, in his very short time at the summit, very small, I have more time today than Brother Castro had at Rio. But in that short time, his speech is incredible. If you haven't heard or read Fidel Castro's Rio speech from 1992, I highly recommend it. It's a master class in speech making to the bourgeoisie. It is a master class. I highly recommend it. At that conference, Castro said, "Make human life more rational, adopt a just international economic order, use science to achieve sustainable development without pollution, pay the ecological debt, eradicate hunger and not humanity." Such a beautiful and simple formulation. Eradicate hunger and not humanity. Donald Trump, eradicate hunger, not humanity. Such a simple and elegant formulation. He received a standing ovation, as he often did. In their hearts, even the most hardened world leaders agreed with the values articulated by Castro. But they had other commitments. These other commitments will suffocate the summit in Doha. I cannot tell you how many ex-presidents and prime ministers I've met over the last 10 years who've told me in a whisper, "I'm back to being a Marxist." Former prime ministers from the African continent, former prime ministers from the Caribbean, "I'm back to being a Marxist. I was a Marxist when I was young, then I became president, I'm a Marxist again." They have other commitments when they come to office. They are suffocated by finance and by the bourgeoisie. Don't underestimate the impact that the capitalist class has on the systems of power. One of the interesting things about a country like China is they don't allow the capitalists to become a class. When the capitalists pop their heads above where they should be, like Jack Ma, they are sent to school. Go read volume 1, Xi Jinping on governance. They don't allow the capitalists to become a class. That is a huge impact on policy making. In Brazil, the capitalists are a class, my friends. They operate as a class. It is not conspiratorial to say that. In fact, in Brazil, you have subsections of the capitalist class, the agrarian, beef, guns, the bullet, whatever it is, the Bible, beef, bullet, Bible. You've already got a sociological breakdown of the capitalist class's mafia attitude towards power. And that's what they have, a mafia attitude. That's why I wrote, they had other commitments. They were suffocated by the capitalist class's mafia attitude. I was a Marxist, I became president, now I'm a Marxist again. Their commitments are made clear by the International Monetary Fund's approach to the maddening debt crisis. Currently, the total external debt owed by developing countries is 11.4 trillion US dollars. That's a lot of money. 11.4 trillion. But this is not the scandal. Here's the scandal. And this is, again, United Nations numbers. The export of commodities to pay off debt, okay, is incredible. Almost 98% of the payments received for exports by developing countries are being used to service the debt held by European and North American bondholders. You see, what this means is almost every dollar that countries earn by selling soya beans or by selling oil or by selling, cocoa or gold, almost every dollar earned by selling commodities is then paid to the bondholders in Europe and the United States largely. They are the biggest holders of this paper, of this debt. What's the point of selling your natural resources? You're just selling your natural resources to earn income to pay off your bondholders, not to enrich your own country. On top of that, the International Monetary Fund imposes a debt limits policy. That's what they call it, debt limits policy, which prevents countries from borrowing beyond a set limit. If the demand of the bondholders are before payments for health and education, they are certainly far ahead of the necessity for investments in infrastructure and industrialization. Bondholders first, then maybe education and health, and far at the rear is investments for infrastructure and industrialization. I'm going to talk about that a little more tomorrow. There is no exit for the developing countries from the catastrophe of capitalist exploitation and the grotesque geography of poverty and humiliation. Don't forget, with poverty comes humiliation. If people are not able to surmount their material conditions, they cannot live in dignity. You can't believe in abstract bourgeois rights. Everybody is equal, everybody is dignified. It's not true. It's not true. If you make people live without the basic needs, their dignity is stripped from them. Abstract bourgeois rights, human rights mean nothing. If human rights organizations are not fighting to end poverty, then they are making a mockery of the concept of human, forget of rights. The draft political declaration being circulated for the Second World Summit for Social Development states that it will uphold the three core themes from the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development of 1995. By the way, there is a draft declaration being circulated, which I don't know if anybody has read. You can see it on the internet. It's very hard to find. It's very hard to find. They say they are going to uphold the three core themes. What are the three core themes? Number one, poverty eradication. Good. Number two, full and productive employment. Very good. Number three, social integration and decent work. Excellent. I agree with all three. Okay, for poverty eradication, the draft says that there is a need to upscale investment in social protection and strengthen financing for social development. Excellent. I agree. For productive employment, the drafters write that countries must increase industrialization and invest in skills, namely education. I agree. Maybe they don't say anything about humanities education. Add that in. I agree. Let's increase industrialization. Let's increase upskilling. For social integration, the drafters say the charge is to reduce inequalities and to create an enabling environment for a decent life. I agree. All of this is fabulous. But there is one theme here that is unaddressed. Where will the money come from? They just don't mention it. They say we must finance this, I agree with everything in this document. Okay, it's what did we call these things? This is not a final statement, it's moving towards the proper socialist agenda. But I'm not going to quibble with it. I agree. Where is the money going to come from? Well, I suspect they will say borrow from the same bondholders who have a gun to the head of the developing countries. I agree. I suppose that's what they'd say. But financing for development should not be seen, and not by us, as merely borrowing from external creditors. The entire framework of financing for development needs to be challenged. Financing for development is not just about banks and money. It is largely about planning for the utilization of national resources, including land and labor. That plan must include the sovereignty of a country over its resources, not the surrender of these resources to multinational corporations who leech the value overseas by such practices as low royalty rates and transfer pricing arrangements. So many countries, whether it is Zambia or it is Chile, so many countries basically hand over their resources to multinational corporations. They don't control them. They hand over labor to foreign companies. They have very little, ability to bring that money into their own coffers. These firms have sovereignty, while most countries only have flags and national anthems. And that's the reason why so many of these populist politicians talk about making their nation great, putting the flag up, singing the national anthem loudly, as if singing it at a higher decibel is going to increase our national sovereignty. A plan for development must articulate how best to marshal these resources for the people's gain. For instance, such a plan should include, and I have 7 ideas. Okay, number 1, a ban on the export of unprocessed raw materials, such as being done by Indonesia, of all countries, over nickel. Hardly a left-wing government, hardly. But Indonesia has said our nickel will be processed at home. Why can't all governments say that? A ban on the export of unprocessed raw materials. Second, a ban on transfer pricing, a profit-shifting activity of multinational corporations that allows them to refuse to pay taxes and to pay low royalties. I've been to the border between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. There is no octroi duty. Trucks just go back and forth, stealing the raw materials from the Congo, and the Congo gets nothing for them. The people get nothing. The government gets nothing. The sovereignty of the country has been completely eclipsed by multinational corporations who are advantaged by the leaching of this money. The biggest terrorists are the accounting firms. These are really dangerous companies, Price Waterhouse Coopers and so on. They are the ones who steal the most money by this transfer pricing, or what we call transfer mispricing, something most people have no idea about because our systems of media and education don't teach people enough about how their own wealth is being stolen from them. Number 3, adopt strict capital controls and seize assets held in illicit tax havens. My friends, even the bourgeois press calls them illicit or illegal tax havens. If everybody agrees that they are illicit and illegal, why do we permit them to exist? And you know, it's so easy for countries to go and invade people. Yeah, they go invade and destroy Libya. Nobody is invading the tax havens. When are we going to invade Liechtenstein? You know, I just want to send the tanks in there. You know, there's island nations that are tax havens. When are we going to invade them? The amount of our money held there is unbelievable. We tried to do a calculation. It is virtually impossible to do an accurate calculation of the amount of money held in illicit tax havens. And capital control, such an easy policy. Malaysia did it. You know, so China thrives by control over capital. Thrives. If you try to break those laws, you're in jail. You know, it's not the petty thief from the favela who goes to jail. It's the guy who tries to break the capital controls. In countries like Brazil, you celebrate them. They are celebrities on Globo. They are celebrated as entrepreneurs. They are breaking every single financial regulation, and you allow them to do advertisements for young people. Become like this crook. You'll be an entrepreneur just like this crook. What has happened to our values? Forget our economic policy. Number 4, adopt ceilings on the interest rate that commercial and multilateral lenders charge developing countries. So easy to do. Adopt ceilings. Exercise your power. Countries don't exercise their power. And regulate interest rates that domestic banks charge for such things as housing loans. Governments allow banks to charge whatever they want for housing loans. They're unregulated sector in most developing countries. Should be fundamentally regulated. We need more popular housing and less money made by speculators on real estate. 5, implement tight regulation for pension funds so that the savings of the people are not used recklessly for financial speculation, and gradually create public sector pension funds. I've never understood why pension funds are privatized. Never understood this. These are the people's savings. I've never understood the need to privatize this and to use it in the casino financial sector. Never understood this. This is the people's savings. So many countries, these savings vanish because of losses in the casino. So many countries. It's ridiculous. It's the people's guaranteed savings. And then the government has to come and top up the private sector losses so that the people don't suffer from no pension payments. Number 6, and this is something Mexico has done and pioneered, create a remittance bank to convert income that comes in for consumption from external workers. So many countries, the Philippines, Mexico, Bangladesh, Nepal, the remittance money coming in from external working class, people going abroad and working, is much higher than the foreign direct investment. But remittances goes directly into consumption. You create a remittance bank. You can convert the remittance money into capital. You can provide a way for people through credit cards and so on to get money for consumption, but also build capital out of it for industrial development. And 7, create conditions for foreign direct investment. Why allow them to come in without conditions, such as reinvestment of profit in the country where they operate, hiring and training domestic labor force, transferring technology, using their expertise to develop the value chain within the country and build infrastructure. Why not? We learned this from the Chinese. China skipped dependency, broke dependency. We never thought any developing country would be able to break the dependency crisis, right? Development is the development of underdevelopment, said Ande Gunder Frank. What happened in China? Then Gunder Frank writes reorient. What happened in China? How did they do it? They put conditions for foreign direct investment, transfer technology, keep the profits in-house, train the domestic workforce, transfer science, and so on. Later, these same companies go to the World Trade Organization and say, China stole our patents. But there's a signed agreement for you to transfer technology. There wasn't any theft. You were so greedy to enter and take advantage of the working class that you gave up your technology. Now China builds the best solar panels, solar technology, all first developed by the Germans. Now Chinese production is way better than the German solar panels. Interestingly, in the draft declaration for Doha, there is only one mention of finance, and that is in the context of climate finance. This has become a way to get around finance. Let's just talk about the climate. There is no discussion about how to raise the resources for development. None. It shows the poverty of the discussion at the highest level on this issue. How can we discuss development if we don't discuss the question of resources and the actual pathway for development? That is what this seminar, The Dilemas of Humanity 4, is about. We cannot imagine social transformation without a program that includes a materialist understanding of transformation. You know, I used to tell Nuri Rosetto that the World Social Forum slogan is a bit odd. Another world is possible. It's a bit odd because that sort of implies that fascism is possible. You know, it implies catastrophe is possible. It's not specific. Our slogan is not another world is possible. I don't like liberal slogans like that. Our slogan is socialism is necessary. Socialism is necessary. My slogan is not another world vague. We don't want vagueness anymore. Socialism is necessary. Capitalism has failed. Sorry, guys. I'm sorry to be blunt. But liberalism has had its time. And neoliberalism has had 30, 40 years to destroy the world. No longer are we going to play around with liberalism. For us, socialism is the only way forward. For us, socialism is the only way forward. It's about time we clarify, clearly talk about what we believe in. There's no point playing around. There's no point being in academic spaces trying to pretend, you know, the old Shiite tradition of taqiyya. You know, the Shiite tradition of taqiyya. I pretend that I'm not a socialist or a Marxist. You know, we have to remain with United Nations language. We need sustainable development and so on. No, we have to go beyond that. It's over. The crisis of civilization is too great for us to wait around for a new period to open in the future. What they are doing in the Sahel states now, in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, is advancing human progress. what people are doing in Latin America and parts of it, what they're doing in China, advancing human progress. We can't sit around and talk about sustainable development. We are talking about socialism. We move, but we move with clarity and confidence. That means we need to be clear about our present, factually precise, and clear about the program of the present for the future. And we need to have confidence in that program. So, dear friends, if we have clarity, if we have confidence, let's go. Let's move. Let's move forward. Thanks a lot.
Bom, deu para ter uma ideia do que vão ser as discussões de amanhã até quinta-feira, né? De um lado, tivemos uma conferência da Cláudia trazendo um sopro de esperança, mostrando que não é tão tranquilo assim o governo Trump, quando a gente viu que as massas se colocaram nas principais capitais, né, do país. E agora tivemos uma fala com um diagnóstico e com 7 propostas muito instigantes, que dá uma vontade maluca da gente começar a discutir, inclusive trazendo para o Brasil. Mas não é isso que nós vamos fazer. A discussão começa amanhã. Ao que parece, o Fernando Haddad não vai poder realmente vir, mas nós queríamos pedir que o Eduardo Suplicy fizesse uma saudação, falasse uns 10 minutinhos. Todos nós conhecemos que o Suplicy, quando chegar no 9º, eu digo para ele terminar.
Como está? Olá, tudo bem?
A última vez que eu te vi foi em Costa Rica.
Puxa vida. Que bom em Costa Rica.
Sim.
Para um bom motivo.
Era aquele congresso de renda mínima.
Exato.
Fala nisso.
Minhas queridas, meus queridos, eu estava em Cajamar, assisti uma palestra do presidente Lula, do Fernando Haddad, e vim para cá para chegar às 7 horas. Ele teria chegado, imagino, porque ele veio de helicóptero. Quer dizer, o presidente saiu de lá de helicóptero, imaginei, vou chegar atrasado, mas cheguei antes dele. Acabei de receber, conversei com ele agora pelo WhatsApp, perguntando se daria para ele vir. Ele disse que não dá para vir hoje, mas que pretende vir amanhã.
Ah, ótimo.
Então, eu tenho uma querida Cláudia de la Cruz, Vijay Prashad e Rosa Marques. Uma satisfação vir aqui. Eu quero lhes confessar, eu vim aqui para saber em que medida essa conferência sobre as necessidades da humanidade vai defender aquilo que as pessoas aqui sabem que eu defendo muito. Sabe o que é, não é?
Claro.
Por favor. What it is? There is a law already in Brazil to institute a citizen's basic income, universal and unconditional. It's already a law. I was the author as a senator when I talked with the rapporteur, era Senador Francelino Pereira. If I may speak in Portuguese, okay? Compreende tudo, né? Não.
Compreendo todo para interpretar isso.
Tá. Então, ele me disse, Eduardo, eu estou com 81 anos, não vou ser mais não vou ser mais candidato, mas quero estudar com atenção a sua proposta. E eis que então eu dei a ele meu livro que tinha acabado de sair, Renda de Cidadania, a Saída pela Porta. Tinha sido publicada a primeira edição no Fórum Social Mundial de Porto Alegre, e eu dei para ele a primeira edição. Agora essa aqui é a 8ª edição, que contém um diálogo meu com o presidente Lula, feito quando completei 80 anos, 21 de junho de 2021, e onde o Lula comenta muito sobre a renda básica, diz que é uma coisa que agora está na hora de ser aplicada, e eu, então the rapporteur told me, after reading the book, it's a good idea, but you need to make it gradually, because if you want to put everything together, the instability will occur. And then I remembered the lessons of James Edward Mead, that wrote about Agatotopia. E na Agatotopia, ele disse, mais pessoas brasileiros aqui, então em Agatotopia, ele diz que por um longo tempo esteve em busca de utopia. Por mais que navegasse, não conseguiu encontrá-la. No caminho de volta, deparou-se com a Agatotopia, que em grego quer dizer um bom lugar. E ele tornou-se amigo de um economista que disse a ele: os agatotopianos sabem onde fica a utopia, mas não vão lhe contar, porque eles têm uma grande diferença com os utopianos, que são seres humanos perfeitos que construíram um lugar perfeito, enquanto nós, agatotopianos, somos seres humanos imperfeitos, mas que conseguimos construir uma sociedade muito melhor. E ele, então, resolveu estudar aqueles arranjos sociais e ficou persuadido de que eram os melhores para atingir os objetivos que tanto a humanidade queria alcançar, de obter o maior padrão de vida possível. De que maneira? Com a liberdade de preços e salários para se obter a melhor alocação de recursos, que desse o maior padrão de vida para todos, que pudesse haver cotas de participação nos resultados, uma boa relação entre empresários e trabalhadores, com os trabalhadores recebendo cotas de participação nos resultados de seu trabalho. Mas como às vezes, por causa de guerras, como atualmente acontece, golpes de Estado e tudo que ele assistiu ao longo do século XX, que ele nasceu em 1907, viu a Primeira, a Segunda Grande Guerra Mundial, as revoluções comunistas, os golpes de Estado por todo o mundo, e ele falou, o importante, no último capítulo ele diz que o importante é você colocar os instrumentos um a um. Se quiser colocar todos ao mesmo tempo, aí vem as grandes instabilidades políticas. E o terceiro instrumento para resolver o problema, inclusive da pobreza e da desigualdade, era a implantação da renda básica de cidadania. Aqui na PUC, eu não conheço tão bem tudo que você ensina, mas tem uma pessoa aqui que é seu colega, economista, o Ladislau Dobor, que aqui se encontra, que ele é um parceiro meu na luta pela renda básica universal. E eu, cada vez mais, estou entusiasmado. Aliás, quero lhes fazer um convite Porque o Brasil, além de ser o primeiro país do mundo cujo Congresso Nacional aprovou por praticamente todos os partidos em dezembro de 2002 no Senado, novembro de 2003 na Câmara dos Deputados, todos os partidos votaram, só algum ou outro pediu para se abster e justamente o economista que eu citei no começo, da Inglaterra, que vivia junto com o Círculo de Cambridge, era colega de John Maynard Keynes. Quando ele chega no último um pouquinho d'água, o último capítulo de A Gata Utopia, ele então defende que se institua a renda básica universal. Mas ele diz que isso tem que ser instituído por etapas a critério do Poder Executivo, começando pelos mais necessitados. Porque o senador Francelino Pereira me disse, olha, você precisa também atender à lei de responsabilidade fiscal, que diz que para cada despesa precisa ter a receita correspondente. Então, eu achei de bom senso que ele inserisse um parágrafo na lei, será instituída por etapas a critério do Poder Executivo, começando pelos mais necessitados, como, portanto, o faz o Bolsa Família. Certo dia, um extraordinário professor de vocês, também da USP, o querido professor Paul Singer, fez comigo uma palestra lá na Secretaria da Receita Federal para umas 600 pessoas presentes, muitos da Secretaria da Receita e estudantes da rede pública. E ele disse, depois de ter falado da história da economia solidária das cooperativas no mundo e no Brasil, ele então disse, olha, vocês agora vão ouvir o professor e senador Eduardo Suplicy, que vai lhes falar da renda básica de cidadania. Quando ela foi aprovada como lei, ele presente na cerimônia, ele disse, eu estava certo que o presidente Lula iria constituir um grupo de trabalho para estudar como será a transição do Bolsa Família até a renda básica universal. Quando ele falou isso, eu falei, que boa ideia. E escrevi para a presidenta Dilma 34 cartas, uma assinada pelos 81 senadores, fazendo a sugestão. Mas ela só conseguiu me receber quando já estava no Palácio da Alvorada, aguardando a decisão do Senado, que infelizmente atirou, e eu teria votado contra se fosse ainda senador. Mas eu continuo com essa proposta e continuei em outubro de 2013, eu escrevi uma longa carta ao presidente Lula, citei 107 pessoas, dos melhores estudiosos, inclusive lá de Aldoba, sobre a transferência de renda, erradicação da pobreza e da renda básica, e propus ao presidente Lula constituir um grupo de trabalho para estudar aquilo que mais e mais muitos economistas laureados com o Prêmio Nobel de Economia, além de James Tobin, Paul Samuelson, e John Kenneth Galbraith e tantos outros que defendem, mas além disso, os membros da BIAN, Basic Income Earth Network, como Felipe Van Pares e Guy Standing e outros, e Então, eu vou concluir em 5 minutos, conforme está aqui pedido. E então, eu estou cada vez mais persuadido de que precisamos insistir, e o Lula, ao me receber dia 1º de fevereiro último no Palácio do Planalto, junto com Alexandre Padilha, então ministro de Relações Institucionais, aceitou a minha proposta de constituição de um grupo de trabalho e para interagir com o chamado Conselhão, Conselho de Desenvolvimento Econômico, Social e sustentável, para estudar isso. E ele aceitou, falou com Alexandre Padilha, que organizou então o grupo de trabalho, que de março de 2024 a novembro de 2024, nos reunimos 10 vezes, de março a novembro, e chegamos a enviar um relatório que por mim foi expresso em 10 minutos de fala para os 246 membros do Conselhão, mas todos os ministros. Deveria estar presente o Lula, mas quem presidiu foi o Alckmin, porque Lula estava hospitalizado em 12 de dezembro, que foi marcado. Mas por que eu acredito tanto nessa proposta? Porque para atingir os objetivos, inclusive de uma sociedade mais igualitária, com as características do socialismo, se faz necessário a instituição da renda básica universal. Mas como assim? Vai pagar uma renda para todos aqui presentes, para a professora Cláudia, para a Rosa Marques, para o Vijay Prashad, para o mais bem-sucedido empresário brasileiro? Sim. Só que, obviamente, os que temos mais iremos contribuir para que nós próprios e todos os demais venham a receber. Que vantagens há, para concluir? Primeiro, eliminamos inteiramente qualquer burocracia envolvida em se ter que saber quanto cada um ganha no mercado formal ou informal. Eliminamos qualquer estigma, o sentimento de vergonha da pessoa precisar dizer: eu só recebo tanto, por isso mereço tanto. Eliminamos os chamados fenômenos da dependência, que acontece quando você tem um sistema que diz que quem não recebe até certo patamar tem o direito de receber tal complemento, como faz o Bolsa Família. Mas, às vezes as pessoas acabam entrando na armadilha do desemprego, ou porque pensam que para conseguir um trabalho que renda tanto, eles têm que realizar um certo esforço e tal, mas se o que eles estariam para receber de repente fosse próximo do Bolsa Família, talvez prefiram não se apresentar para o trabalho e ficam no desemprego. Mas se todos partirmos da renda básica como um direito à cidadania, daí para frente só há o estímulo ao progresso. Mas qual é a principal vantagem da renda básica universal? É do ponto de vista de que nos fala o Prêmio Nobel de Economia Amartya Sen, em Desenvolvimento como Liberdade, onde ele diz que desenvolvimento, se for para valer, precisa significar maior grau de liberdade para todos. E ele conta uma história muito interessante em Desenvolvimento como Liberdade, que quando ele tinha 10 anos de idade, seu pai era um bom professor e vivia em Dhaka, que era a Índia na época, Bangladesh hoje, mas ele Seu pai era um bom professor, moravam numa boa casa. Certo dia ele estava brincando no jardim da sua casa, quando de repente entrou um homem gritando por socorro, esfaqueado nas costas. Ele logo chamou por seu pai, que veio, acompanhou seu pai levando aquele homem cadermia para o hospital. No caminho ele disse, bem que minha mulher tinha me avisado para não vir a este lugar tão perigoso, caracterizado por lutas étnicas, mas eu não tive outra alternativa senão aqui encontrar o trabalho que pudesse dar o sustento da minha família. Mas ao chegarem no hospital, teve uma forte hemorragia e veio a falecer. Conclui a Amartya Sen, tipicamente este homem não tinha liberdade real, precisou colocar a sua saúde e vida em risco para conseguir um trabalho que pudesse sustentar a família. Certo dia eu recebi no meu gabinete uma freira que era de uma ordem italiana dedicada às prostitutas e uma ex-prostituta que vieram lá. Nós queremos te convidar para vir no Parque da Luz conversar conosco. E aí eu fui e expliquei essas coisas para mães que me disseram, olha, eu estava sem poder dar de comer em casa para minhas crianças e vim aqui vender o meu corpo no Parque da Luz e outras histórias. Também, perhaps you know well the story of o Homem na Estrada. Conhece bem? O Homem na Estrada. The Man on the Road. Do meu amigo Mano Brown, dos Racionais MCs. Porque aquele rapaz que não tendo alternativa para auxiliar no seu orçamento, resolve se tornar o aviãozinho da quadrilha de narcotraficantes, como o homem na estrada que recomeça o seu caminho, a sua dignidade, a sua liberdade, que foi perdida, subtraída, quer mostrar a si mesmo que realmente mudou, que se recuperou, quer viver em paz e dizer ao crime nunca mais. O dia que houver para aquela mãe, para esse rapaz, uma renda básica suficiente para atender às suas necessidades vitais, para si, cada membro da sua família, aquela mãe e esse rapaz vão poder dizer, não, agora eu não preciso aceitar essa única alternativa que me surge pela frente, mas que vai ferir a minha dignidade, colocar minha saúde e vida em risco. Agora eu posso aguardar um tempo, quem sabe fazer um curso com a professora Rosa Marques, até que surja uma oportunidade mais de acordo com a minha vocação, com a minha vontade. É neste sentido, pois, que a renda básica universal, quando assim se constituir, será uma forma de assegurar maior liberdade a todo o povo brasileiro e americano. Olha, posso deixar para PUC um presente? 3 livros meus.
Ok.
Renda de Cidadania, Saída pela Porta, com o prefácio da conversa com Lula. Um Jeito de Fazer Política, escrito com a Mônica Dallari, que é uma jornalista que ajudou-me a escrever. E também o livro da maior autoridade sobre esse tema, que é o professor Felipe Van Pares e Yannick van der Borg, nesse livro que tem o meu prefácio, Renda Básica, uma proposta radical para uma sociedade livre e economia sã. Então, eu vou escrever um dedicatório aqui para professores e alunos da PUC, e então você administra o que vai ser. Mas tem um convite na última semana de agosto, dia 25 a 29, vai haver em Niterói e Maricá a realização do 24º Congresso Internacional da BIAN, Basic Income Earth Network, com a presença de Felipe Vampares, Guy Stenning e tantos outros maiores especialistas, e escolheram o Brasil e Maricá porque lá está havendo um exemplo da aplicação da renda básica. Já quase metade da população, que são os 200 mil, 93 mil pessoas estão recebendo em moeda social mombuca, uma mombuca igual a R$1, 230 reais por mês. Então é uma experiência que causou vontade em todos os países de conhecerem de perto. Então, e vocês todos são convidados, se quiserem. Está aqui o Leandro Ferreira, foi embora, que é presidente da Rede Brasileira da Renda Básica. Basta acessar o site da BIAN ou da Rede Brasileira da Renda Básica para se inscreverem. Então, eu espero todos vocês lá em Maricá, em Niterói, e conclamo todos vocês a batalharem. E quando o Fernando Haddad vier amanhã aqui, perguntar se de fato o governo Lula até 2026, se ele vai implementar a renda básica universal, tá bem? Muitíssimo obrigado a vocês. Esse é o meu presente para vocês.
Bom, obrigada, Suplicy. Talvez um 8º ponto nas suas propostas seja exatamente a renda básica. Tá? Porque eu defendo também, numa outra perspectiva, talvez, ligada à produtividade, inteligência artificial, outras coisas mais. Mas é sério, a proposta é interessante e acho que hoje o Suplicy, num determinado momento, ele foi no fulcro da questão. Não tem importância se o rico vai ganhar renda. Se o princípio da renda básica for a socialização do aumento da produtividade, tá? Mas isso fica para discussão. A organização me disse que os convidados internacionais têm uma outra atividade daqui a pouco, então nós temos as palestras iniciais que vão animar as discussões que vão prosseguir amanhã. Muito obrigado pela presença e obrigado aos palestrantes. De nada.
Thank you very much.